big finish tonight. The Republican effort to block the vote, it just continues. It's their top priority. We've seen the GOP legislative efforts to suppress the Democratic voting blocs in a number of states this season. We've told you about Florida, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. Now it's Michigan, where there are reports of voters being turned away because they refuse to check a box asking them about their citizenship on the ballot. The Republican-led state legislature passed a bill requiring voters to affirm citizenship, but Governor Rick Snyder, he vetoed it. A rare good thing for him, citing potential confusion among voters. Well, that confusion was evident at the polls last night during the Michigan primary, as poll workers actually argued with voters who refused to check a box that they are not legally required to do. All these efforts are aimed at suppressing the vote in order to stop the so-called voter fraud. The problem is voter fraud doesn't exist. Republicans can't get elected on their agenda of slashing Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. They can't get elected on advocating for tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans at the expense of the middle class. So what do? Well, they resort to voter suppression through the legislative process at the state level. The Romney campaign has signed on to the strategy. As we have told you, they have been spreading the lie that the Obama campaign is trying to deny the right of active military servicemen and women in Ohio from early voting. The exact opposite is the truth. The Obama campaign is trying to expand early voting for all registered voters, including military personnel. I'm joined tonight by John Bocherry, former Ohio congressman, lieutenant colonel, and instructor pilot in the Air Force Reserve. He also works with the Obama re-election campaign. John, good to see you again. Good to have you with us.
Thanks, Ed, for having me.
You bet. I'm really surprised that there are 15 military groups that are intervening in this lawsuit in Ohio, which the Obama campaign has filed. And they're siding with Mitt Romney. What's the disconnect here? Are they misguided?
Well, it's a shame that the Republicans are using our veterans groups as cover fire for their true mission, which I believe is to roll back early voting in Ohio. And the irony of this whole thing, Ed, is that those same veterans, nearly 1 million of them, and military members' families, those who are currently serving on active duty or in the reserves, are not going to be able to early vote because of the efforts of the Republicans in the state legislature. They've essentially rolled back what was in place in the 2008 election because of the success of the program.
You think that this is a hangover from Measure 2 because the get-out-to-vote effort was so strong, and then the Republican legislature in Ohio went to work to try to suppress the vote?
No question. In fact, 1/3 of all the votes that were cast in 2008 were by in-person early voting. And in 2 of the largest counties in Ohio, Cuyahoga County and Franklin County, in the last 3 days of the election, nearly 20% of all the votes that were cast were early votes. So it is very clear that this has been a coordinated, precise action by the Republicans, as if it was a joint military effort across the country to try to roll back voting rights. Whether you're in Florida, whether you're in Michigan or Pennsylvania, we've seen this act before. In Ohio, let me add this one point, Ed, they even tried to pass a bill that suggested if you showed up at the wrong precinct, you couldn't be told which was the right precinct to go to and vote. It's outrageous.
Why are Republicans attacking these labor-rich states? I have a theory that, of course, the labor movement in this country has got tremendous infrastructure. They could get boots on the ground, so they've got to put strength against strength to try to suppress the vote where the labor-rich states' workers are. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's an outrage, and for someone like myself who's actually flown ballots into Baghdad and watched the Iraqis perform their own democracy in elections by dipping a finger in ink, and that was how they, discounted fraud. We see this coordinated effort to try to push people away from the polls. The facts are that it was a razor-thin election in 2004. Nearly 100,000 votes separated John Kerry from becoming president and President Bush being reelected. And that's about, ironically, how many votes would be counted in the last 3 days of election if they roll back early in-person voting. So we've got to support the president's his lawsuit here that's going to restore early voting for everybody, including those military families, for the million veterans in Ohio, and restore some sanity in our election process back in the state.
Obviously, there's going to be a court ruling probably next week, we're told August 15th, but what can be done to stop all of this outside of that?
Well, if you believe in what we've been talking about, is that everybody who is a registered voter in Ohio and has the ability to vote early should be able to do that all the way up to the election. It worked in 2008. There was no reason why the legislature took this action to roll it back other than to suppress the vote. So if you can go online, go to votevets.org and sign our petition and help us support veterans restoring their right to exercise early voting privileges in the state, and hopefully follow this and track this as the president's lawsuit is heard in the courts.
John Bocherry, good to have you on the